So the question, how to avoid paying alimony, is a question that divorce attorneys come across a lot. The time to ask that question, of course, is before you get married. And the answer is simple, is you would have a prenuptial agreement. A prenuptial agreement is a contract that you enter into with your intended spouse, and you resolve many issues, one of those issues being alimony. You would simply make a term of the prenuptial agreement that neither party would have to pay alimony in the instance of divorce. If your prenuptial agreement complies with your state laws, it's enforceable, and the issue of alimony should not arise at all during the divorce. That's the safest way. However, if you are married and you are asking this question, let's say the issue of divorce has not arisen, you could get a postnuptial agreement that you would enter into with your spouse, similar to the prenuptial agreement, wherein both of you would waive your right to collect alimony from the other. That's a little more difficult, a delicate situation that I have not really seen very often, to tell you the truth. Usually, when you're married and you're looking to avoid paying alimony, it's because you're heading toward a divorce. The time to ask this question is before you talk to your spouse about divorce. Planning to avoid paying alimony can actually be very effective. The first thing you do is you decide what kind of risk you're at for paying alimony. So for instance, if there's a large income disparity, you make significantly more income than your spouse, there's a good chance that you'll have to pay alimony. That chance becomes less even if there is an income disparity, if it's a very brief marriage. If it's a short marriage, then the likelihood that you're going to pay alimony is significantly decreased. Similarly, if your spouse is educated and has employable talents that are not outdated, like for instance, if they have a law degree, computer programming, they're a college graduate, or they had significant work experience before the marriage and just left the workforce for a few years, that would also go into that the spouse could be rehabilitated, and you might want to start that process before you begin to talk to your spouse about the idea of divorce. So if your spouse is not working, if they're working a long time, all of these factors matter. The other thing that matters is fault. If you're looking at a divorce because your spouse has done something, like for instance, is involved in an adulterous relationship, that is something that you would want to collect evidence. Don't create drama. Don't talk to your spouse. Get the evidence of the fault. Your spouse may be abusive. Get evidence. The more unlikable you can make your spouse if you end up in a trial over the issue of alimony, the better your chances are. So you prove fault. Another thing, if there are children, you would look to have custody of the children. It may be appropriate for you to have custody of the children. If it's not, then you might want shared physical custody of the children. But you look at that, you analyze that, and you set the stage so that it would be a plausible result for the children to go and live with you at the time of separation, or the children to at least be with you half of the time. The more custody of the children you have, the less alimony you'll pay, or the less likelihood there is that you will be paying alimony. So you would consider those things also. It's a lot. There's a lot of moving pieces, and it's best to really think it through and make a plan. How do you get custody? How do you increase your chances to have at least equal access to the children? You get more involved in the day-to-day life. You cook for them, you take them on their play dates, you take them to school, you do the homework with them. You get as involved with the children as possible, and again, collect evidence of that. So there's also while saying on the one hand, change your circumstances, and yes, that means delaying your exit from the marriage, there's also don't procrastinate, don't take too long. The longer you're in the marriage, the greater the likelihood that you're going to pay alimony, and the greater the likelihood that you're going to pay alimony for a long period of time. So plan to get out as quickly as possible. Don't collect any more assets. Do whatever you need to do there. There's also, for instance, if you work overtime, you might want to cut a lot back on overtime. Don't do anything to really increase your income as you're approaching the period where you're going to start the divorce process. Don't increase the amount of income that you're bringing in. And perhaps the best thing that you could do is talk to a divorce attorney before you talk to your spouse. Put together a cohesive plan, something that makes sense for you. If you are going to pay alimony, then look at the alternatives, how you can decrease or at least minimize that hurt. There are ways, for instance, alimony can be indefinite. In other words, you keep paying it and there is no end to it. So you would negotiate a definite term of alimony, like 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, depending on the circumstances. And in that term, you could negotiate a higher amount that decreases. It gets less and less and less. So that's one alternative. Another thing that you can do is you could buy out alimony. So you might transfer an asset that, an income producing asset or an asset of some kind of value that your spouse would have in lieu of alimony. Those are some of the tactics that you could do. You could use your retirement asset and you can transfer that to your spouse with the idea that you would be able to build your retirement asset back up. So it's a good idea to evaluate your circumstance, make a plan, make whatever effort you could do ahead of time to minimize the risk of alimony. If you're going to pay alimony, then what you need to do is plan how I'm going to pay a lesser amount for a shorter period of time. You can come and talk to us. We are very happy and skilled in making plans to avoid and minimize the risk of alimony.